Alright everybody, ho ho ho. Today I've got a cool video about a pretty neat sword. These are pretty popular and I kind of want to show this one to you. Give a little bit of a history lesson about these type of naval cutlasses. Just adjust this real quick. There you go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so what I have here is a British pattern 1804 Royal Navy Cutlass. This one came to me from Australia, but I don't really know what the provenance of this cutlass is. It's in really good shape, and I will go ahead and kind of talk about the history of this sword, and then I will describe this sword to you as I have it and compare it with another naval cutlass, a much later version. So the pattern 1804 naval cutlass was made an official pattern for the Royal Navy in 1804, just in time for the Battle of Trafalgar, which there were many accounts of soldiers actually using these against the French, and these are pretty famous during that battle. But they were also at Santo Domingo in 1806, at the Dardanelles versus the Turks in 1807. They were in the War of 1812 against the Americans. They were at Salona Bay in 1827. They were at the 1845 Anglo-French blockade during Obligado at Rio de la Plata, and I believe that's the last time these were under official patterning, because the famous 1845 naval cutlass became a pattern during that year. But as with many things concerning British standard patternings of swords during history, we know that swords weren't always, just because a pattern was in vogue or issued doesn't mean that it was used by the men concurrently and contemporarily with that design. So for instance, I have a Boer War sword that was used by somebody in 1900, and it's an 1853 pattern cavalry saber. So this sword could have been, especially if this was in Australia, this could have been used for, way after 1845. So, but again, I don't know exactly the provenance of this sword, but I do know the importance of the 1804 pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and describe this sword as I have it here in front of you. This is an all iron construction. So unlike a lot of other swords where there's multiple media to construct the sword, this is completely iron from the guard to the blade. Now the blade is steel, but that's iron. So it has a figure 8 bull guard, which these were fairly common even before this pattern became a thing. I'm pretty sure swords like this were used way before 1804. So it has a rolled back edge for strength. The grip is cast iron and is very shapely. I'm a big fan of this grip. Really lends to pointing for a thrust. It has a sword knot loop right here. It is peened, and the peen is very strong. That's quite the beefy, peen. It has a very drastic distal taper. You can see how thick it is here versus how narrow it gets until it becomes a false edge. Say about 10 inches from the or 7 inches or 8 inches or so from the tip, and it is, I'd say, maybe 24 inches long. It's a pretty short sword, so, but it's in excellent shape for its age. So yeah, that's this sword as I describe it, or as I see it. And these are very, very famous. One for being at Trafalgar and being used in the accounts that I've read. And two, because really it kind of ushers in an era of British regulation naval cutlasses that have a lot of effect throughout the world. The Royal Navy, during and after the adoption of this pattern, really were dominant throughout the world. So it's pretty neat to have a piece of history that was so important. Now, these were general issue weapons, so these weren't like an officer's weapon or anything. These have been stowed in racks. The grip and guard were japanned, which means they were enameled this thick black paint, and it's pretty damn thick. So, and then the blades would have been heavily greased and stowed for boarding actions or landing parties, because the British Navy did do landing parties with these. So typically Marines would have used their muskets or even I guess their muskets with their bayonets as their primary weapon, but sailors would have been issued out a cutlass. So it doesn't have a lot of taper from side to side, the width of the sword, but the thickness is quite drastic, as I said. So it actually makes for quite it's chunky feeling, but it is very, for its size, it's actually quite nimble. And I would be pretty happy if I was issued this, all things considered. If beggars can't be choosers, this is a pretty damn good sword. And as a testament, regardless of how old this is, these stopped really being used past like the 1860s. So even if this is in that tail end of production for this type of sword, just the fact that this sword is still, in as good a shape as it is, there are many Civil War swords that are way worse off, American Civil War swords, and this is a much older pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and hold up another sword that is a later pattern of naval cutlass that I'm a big fan of, and I will kind of compare and contrast these two together. So this is my 1900 pattern Royal Navy Cutlass. This is a very different sword, and I'll kind of show this. So well, for one thing, it's way longer by like 8 inches or so, and it features, instead of a peened construction, it features a full width patented tang, which is my preference for a sword. Even though these are incredibly strong, I just prefer this style. One, because they're ease of maintenance. If these scales fall off or whatever, you can just rivet whatever on, and they will, your sword will be good to go. Or you can just wrap it. You can use the holes and just wrap cord around it, and you'll have a functional handle. Whereas this, if this starts coming loose or whatever, which, I've never seen one that was loose. Granted, these are built like tanks. You have to like repeen it. So, but that's like worst case scenario. So either way, both of these are extremely good swords. I just prefer the full width pattern tang, patented tang. The guards are very different. The 1900 pattern is far more protective of a right-handed user There's not these figure 8 guard with, you know, exposed finger sections, but you know, if you were to present it this way, most of my hand is covered up. I only have my thumb sticking out a little bit. It's ambidextrous, so that makes it nice. And it does have a good amount of protection during the thrust. And this would be a pretty fearsome weapon to punch with. So you can see a clear evolution here of design processes, so, or design thought. The 1900 is a much better protective sword. The blades are different. Now, while the 1900 does have a taper down the length for, as far as width, the 1804 does not. So you can see the 1900 pattern is far more of a skewer. The 1900 pattern does also have a false edge that starts way further back. It's about a little less than halfway down the blade is a false edge. So it's a lot more thrust capable, but then again, it can be more prone to edge damage. So whereas the false edge starts about right here on 1804, false edge on this sword starts about here. So you can see the clear difference. The 1900 pattern features a fuller on both sides of the blade, which the 1804 does not. And both are japanned in the hilt, so they have that heavy black enamel. This does not have a rack number, or hardly, it has hardly any markings. I think there's just like one X marking, which would have denoted a bevel be put on it. But this is, again, sort of a mystery sword. This is a very standard issue 1804 pattern, so, and I'm not surprised this has no identifying markings. At this stage in British naval history, things weren't as codified and standardized as they would be in 1900. So obviously the 1900 has stamps all over it, and the 1804 does not. As far as this sword, this is a very well-made sword. I really admire the craftsmanship. I think, you know, once again, this would be an excellent issued weapon in a pinch. It's short, it's handy. It'd be pretty brutal in a fight to get up close, and yeah, this does have some damage on the, not damage, but strike marks here. So you can see where the guard was struck, and these are like, this is very clearly from an edge. This isn't like being dropped. It's like two very exact points here and here. So maybe this was used for practice, or this was used in anger. I don't have a clue. I do know that the one side is bent down from where those strikes are. So maybe that's an indication that this was used to parry. Other than that, it's pretty standard. These shell guards, or this figure 8 guard, are almost perfect squares turned into circles. So they're about as wide as they are tall. And what else can I say? The grip is really nice. Like I said, it has this grenade, pineapple grenade texture, which is really actually quite nice. I like this grip. I think it was a very good choice to go with that, especially being at sea. Maybe you're in a fight and your hands are already wet from ocean water or rain or whatever, or blood, and having that grip really is actually quite nice. Very forward thinking. I think the 1845 pattern have this similar type of sort of grip, maybe a little bit different shape, but that sort of grenade brick wall sort of look. So yeah, overall I believe this is an excellent weapon for what it was intended for. And compared to the 1901, you can definitely see the clear evolution and thought processes that led to the 1901, because this is the final pattern of British Royal Navy Cutlass. These are still used today, or still issued on boats today, or used on boats today, or they're hanging around, but not in as many numbers as would have been, compared to when the Royal Navy was still doing landing parties with, or boarding parties with cutlasses before they used just primarily guns. So this is 1804 British pattern Royal Navy Cutlass. Again, I really like this sword. It's in excellent shape. Rings really nicely. Let's see if I can. Yeah, rings kind of nicely. And that's about all I have for this video here. So hope you enjoyed it. I will have more sword videos for you coming up. In fact, I will go get one real quick to show you the next video. Yeah, so next week I will be, or next time I make a video, I guess, I'll be talking about this sword, which is I believe a 1854 model French dragoon saber. And this is a pretty damn cool sword. It's very similar to the cuirassier sword. I believe just like an inch or two shorter, and I mean almost identical to that sword. The wire wrap has fallen off, or it's coming apart, but this sword is pretty cool. So I will be talking about it next time. But for now, this has been the 1804 pattern Royal Navy Cutlass. Thanks for watching.